good, man?
I'm good, Gal. How are you doing?
Good.
Come on over. What's going on, everybody? So today I got my buddy Gao in the chair. We'll be doing a one fade with 0 tapers. We'll also be styling his hair into a comb over, adding an additional part line as well. This is what I like doing first. Take a look at the whole entire head, see what I'm working with. And then from here, start parting out where the client's hair turns into that comb over to create your shape initially. After this, I'll start implementing guidelines. So once this is all combed out, you could see a really great general idea of how the hair should lay, how dense the hair is in certain areas, and if there are any bumps and grooves on the client's scalp. And so far, so good. Nothing that we're needing to worry about. So once you part everything all out, nice and neat, this is when I start implementing guidelines. So take your time with parting out the hair, take your time with combing out the hair. You could see how that hair lays so beautifully. So with Gao's hair, what I like doing is I like creating 0 guidelines right above the ear with my trimmers. And then you proceed by taking out the bulk. Same thing on the other side, replicate the same height in the same general area. And lastly, for his back, what I like doing, I like asking the client to push their head just a tad bit forward, so that actually raises that area for you to actually see everything. Right about here, we'll make our last guideline. And finally, get rid of all the bulk beneath. All right, next up, what I like doing next, I love to create the structure that you're going to be making and sculpting this into a comb over. In other words, debulking. So I like having my clipper on the open setting, get nice softer blends rather than tight and close. And what I like doing to get rid of all this bulk and to sculpt the comb over into shape is actually using a clipper comb technique like this. So what I like doing is using this technique to debulk, as you can see, going in on an angle, coming down on it on an angle. Creates that shape really nicely. You gotta be sure you utilize this pivot of the comb, come straight off the head in order to get that nice soft blend up above. I'm gonna bring this all the way around. So here's the final product of debulking with clipper over comb opposing to debulking with clips on your clipper. What the difference is, you actually get to mold and sculpt the client's head shape more thoroughly with a custom fitting as you go through with clipper over comb, opposing to having to put on a customized guard and having it fixated sitting on the client's head. From here, what I like doing, I'll put on my base guard, which is going to be a number 1 guard. I'll close it, and I'm going to make a secondary guideline in order to reinforce the fade. Switching over to my comb, now I'll start by making my secondary guideline with the number 1 guard closed.
actually you should be fine.
Let's see. All right, so here it is, the final product with the one guard, creating the one guideline.
Spin it completely around so you show the whole thing. And you're good.
Next, we'll get our number 2 guard. We'll start with being open, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna tackle this whole entire panel in order for this fade to start going all the way around Gao's head. And we'll focus on the taper section afterwards. So starting with one side. So a great rule of thumb to understand how high you're supposed to go up with your clippers is what I like to do is I like to get the comb and teeter it on the client's head. This is where you naturally find where the parietal ridge is. And in order to understand what the parietal ridge does, this reinforces the structure in the client's head. So if you go anywhere up past this and you dig into the structure, then your client is gonna have more of a cone-shaped finish rather than a square-shaped finish. So keep that in mind whenever you guys cut hair. Fade the clients in. And I love flicking off immensely at the very end in order to get like a nice, soft, subtle blend. Make sure it works super duper easy. Once you finish with the clipper being open, now I'm going to close it halfway. I'm going to repeat the same step. And you guys got to make sure you don't go as high, but you are stacking it pretty close for that last section that we had of it being open. You can see an example of how high this should go. And here's an example of it being halfway closed, an example of how high this should go. Very, very close. Micro stacks. Now when we finish at the halfway mark, we're going to close it all the way. Repeat the same steps. So after your 2 guard, we're going to pop on our number 1 half guard. Really, really similar guard, except the only difference is this is a half increment smaller. So from the top, we're going to start from it being open, go all the way around, close it halfway, finally close it all the way. From the top, all the way open, you can see how close it is, mimicking the 2 guard being closed. And now we have the 1 half guard being opened, riding right on top and blending into that previous section. Halfway open now. Here's where you start to see that bottom line slowly start to disappear. Here we go. Take a quick 360 of how the number 2 and number 1 guard looks, blending out that bottom line. Next, we'll pop on our number 1 guard. We'll start with the 1 guard now. Start from the top, fully opened. I'm going to slowly pick away at this bottom line until it fully disappears. So keep in mind, this is the same guard we used to create that baseline of a number 1 to implement the fade line fully closed. So once we reach the fully closed mark, that's when we'll start to see the difference in change of making sure that this bottom line really disappear. So from the top, open. Make sure to keep your strokes consistent from the front of the head to the back of the head. As you get closer to the back of the head, strokes start to get more tighter and tighter. Make sure that the consistency is the same throughout, from the front all the way to the midsection, leading into the back. That's how you keep your fades consistent. Now guiding all the way to the back, we start to see that line really disappear now. So now we'll close it and increment just the quarter mark. Usually when I get to the number 1 and 0.5 guards is when I use more subsections rather than from open, midway to fully closed. It'll be open, quarter close, 3/4 closed, fully closed. More tedious steps will give you more refined fades. So now we'll get to that halfway mark. Here it goes, 2 notches. And we're just merely picking away at that little reminiscence of a line. Remember to really pick off and fade off of it instead of going in more of a jagged motion. What you want to do is more of a C motion. Almost like you're bouncing off the head. Really loose wrist movements. Make sure your wrist is really smooth and just dangling. That's how you get that nice C motion in order to get that fade to come out really nice and get it to come out in your favor. Now we're at the 3/4 closed mark. You're just going to repeat that same step until you get to that fully closed mark. Here's where you start to see some little imperfections pop up before you get to that bottom line. Whatever you lighten up down low will always darken up top. So I'll show you guys a little rebuffer phase where you could go through those steps and areas that to refine your work and make sure it looks really nice. Fully closed. Now before we get to that really last bottom line, which is the 0.5 guard and the open blade work, what I want to point out to you guys is this is natural. It happens all the time. Bulk always stacks up in this midsection as you fade down and get closer to the bottom. And it's natural every single time you lighten up something down low, up top will always darken up. So what I like to do is rebuff these little areas out with those guards we once used there before. before we proceed on to that bottom section of our work. You can see how that shot line still is very, very consistent, but it could use a little bit of tinkering in order for it to really look appealing. So we'll hop back over to our 2-guard. We'll put this bad boy back on. And we're gonna re-go through all these little steps in order for this to really blend out the way we want it to. From the top, open. And at this point, I like using my sensory. I like hearing, I like feeling this, make sure that the hair is actually cutting, because it's such a tedious little margin that anyone can miss out on this. Fully closed. All right, a very, very fine margin, but those little ticks you hear the clipper catch are those little areas that start to smooth on out a little bit. So before we head on to the next guard, I just want to show you guys a little 360. Now we'll hop over to our number 1/2 guard again. Rebuff out these little areas. You can see that little shot line, still a little reminiscence of a bulk pattern, but fear not, this is going to get everything out. From the top, open. And as I'm cutting, I could feel and hear the clipper actually hitting those little tick marks of those subsections, and that's a telltale letting us know that we're actually hitting the right section. We'll close it halfway, do it again. Close it another increment. And lastly, fully closed. So let's show you guys the final product of re-going through those stages of refining that midsection work with your number 2 guard and your number 1/2 guard. You see the difference in change of now flowing so much more nicer than once before. Comfortably now, it's safe to say we can move on to the next steps to making sure that this fade all ties together. Now we're going to start targeting these taper lines. From it being open, I'm going to fade on top and flick off and over it. And granted, since it's such a little tiny, tight area, it's not going to take long to make sure that this little section gets buffed out. So you don't have to waste so much time making sure that that area actually fades out. Open, close it a quarter, close it a quarter, another quarter. And finally, we're fully closed. You can go back to the top and do it again just to cross-check and be sure everything's all done and out. Close it fully. There you go. Side 1 is finished. Side 2, fully opened. Now pay attention to Gao's hair. It combs down on a diagonal, which makes this cut kind of difficult in ways. So if you're cutting against the grain, you're definitely going to make sure this hair is fading the way that it should. But if you're cutting the opposite grain, you're going to have a very, very hard time making sure that this section actually grows out the way that it should and fades out the way that it should. So if you see how the hair hooks over his ear, you can see that it actually comes off on almost parallel to his head and then goes up above his ear. So to attack hair that gives you such a problematic situation like this, what I like to do is I'll close the clipper halfway and I'll go against it, literally, just to make sure that it cuts. Here's a better angle and view. And then you can proceed. So we're at the halfway mark right now. We'll close it a quarter. We're 3/4 closed. I'm gonna go over this little section and area once again, and then we'll fully close it. We'll do the same exact thing. Fully closed. We'll come back on top over it as well. Backside, you're gonna do the exact same steps from open, and we'll close it a quarter increment at a time. From the middle, I'll really lay it in there and flick it out, up and out. And we'll pivot to one side. Make sure that stroke is very consistent. Make sure it doesn't tighten up as you get to the very end here. And you're gonna do the same thing on the other side and replicate the same thing. Make sure it doesn't tighten up. Make sure your strokes are consistent, and that's how your fades are gonna come out really nice and uniform. And here's the final product. I'll show you guys from side, left side, back side, and gal's right side. One of my favorite parts of the haircut is actually using open blade work on clients and switching over to a brush. And this is where fades really tie themselves together. So moving on and migrating over to a brush is what's going to give you that detailed work. So you're able to brush out every single little grain and work on the last final step and stage of what's left to cut, and which is the bottom line in the open blade. I like making sure that each section is margined off at an increment every single time. So this clipper doesn't have notches as the other one does, but it's more free flowing. So from the top, it's going to be open. And then the next section after that is going to be a quarter close, we're about halfway closed, 3/4 closed. I'm going to close it all the way, bump it up, that's the third measurement. The final measurement is fully closed. So from the top, open, and now you're going to close it a quarter. You're gonna brush, you're gonna brush off the hairs off your clipper. This is a great way to see when hair is actually being clipped, especially when you're working on such a little fine area. Right, brush, close it a quarter. Fully closed. Don't be ashamed to repeat the same steps in order to make sure that everything was caught. From the top, open, quarter close, another quarter closed, we're about halfway, 3/4 closed, and finally fully closed. All right. You're gonna do the same thing for the back now. Bit bigger range of real estate to work on, but you gotta make sure that you're in control. Fully open. Take a second to pause to see if hair is actually being clipped on the clipper, and you can definitely see hair has fallen on top of it, which means we're in the right area. Now we close it about halfway mark now. This is where I want you guys to really feather that little fine line and just dance right on top of that section with less pressure as possible. All right, let's take a look at it. Final product before we move on to the next steps and sections of the hair. See how everything is tied together very beautifully. What's left to do now we'll line up the whole entire nape section over the ears, give them the hooks. We'll even add in the line for the part as well. And so I'll show you guys how we do that. So now I've switched over to a detailing tool. This is a Babyliss trimmer, Gold Effects. And what I like using this for is for lining up those detailed areas and creating those nice hard part sections if clients ask for it. So what I like doing first is I actually like lining up the nape section. So by lining up the nape section, I'll switch over to a more firm brush. I'll brush out those little fine points, and I'll work my way up and make sure that it's as straight as possible. And once it cannot get more straight and it starts to turn, you're going to start to pivot and turn your tool on a lateral, and you're going to pivot the whole entire way over in order for that curvature to happen. Now we're going to clean it up by going with the grain every single nook and cranny that you followed this with. There you go. Moving over to the part, I like making sure that the part is as straight as possible with my fine tooth comb. And while we're here, you might as well start etching out this part line for Gao. A great tip with parts is I like making my parts going down on the subject rather than flipping the trimmer around and going on top of it and pushing up on it. You jeopardize more of the hair of the comb over up top if you were to use the trimmer like so and bring it all the way around and down. So if you take the dangers out the way by combing the hair up and out the way, you'll be able to create the line down on top of the subject, and you'll push the hair down to create more of a sharp line in order for that part to be really, really thin and sharp. And that actually makes sure that the hair up top isn't in danger from being cut, and the only thing you're really targeting is the hair below it. I'll get you to tilt your hair down like this. There we go. So I did a really brisk pass through of where this line should be first, and now we have like that line implemented, and from here I'll make sure I'll take my time by putting a little bit of pressure and wiggling it up and down and rocking it in order for that line to really get crisp. You guys can see how beautifully that line comes out, and the final step is to comb down on that whole entire line. You can see all those hairs that come out with it. One of the finishing tools I like to use is a foil shaver, and this is what gives that taper, that burst effect that you want to see. So we'll be using it in every single little stubble section that you see below in order for that taper to really, really draw to its fullest potential. Now, some of you guys might ask, how high are you supposed to go with this machine? So the idea is you have to keep a mental note of where you used and implemented that first guideline, and make sure you're about like a half increment below of that subject. And once you reach that point of where that line was created, you kind of just flick off of it. That's how you get everything to tie together and blend to one seamless transition. All right, so finally we're gonna get to trimming the top on Gao's hair. So we're just gonna make sure everything's all saturated. Here's where you get to really see in full detail if the hair is going to be compatible by sitting on top of the blend. And from here, you can actually see how long the hair has grown to once it's wet. So by creating your first section, I like making sure that everything's all combed to how it should be styled first. And taking the first section, I'll actually focus on the tip of the comb in order to make my first initial guideline. And by doing so, you can actually pull the hairs that aren't going to be cut and the hairs that will be cut down. And now you're isolating the whole entire section that you want to cut. So before you even snip, you have to consult with your client and make sure that this is the desired length that they want to go with. So I'll go with confirm. And gal, hey gal, is this the length that's comfortable to you?
Yeah, that's good.
So after you confirm what's the appropriate length, you could proceed by making sure you go through the entire section and cutting the entire section like so. So going on to the next section, here is how you make sure that everything is cut evenly and identical. So by taking that next section, you could actually put everything together and you can see beneath where it needs to be cut. So you got to make sure that everything beneath is matching up to that new hair and just cut it straight across. Very, very simple. Subtle, but very deadly and dangerous once you style it all together. Do the same thing for that next section and just go forth with it. So once you finish the whole entire section from front to back, in order to make sure that everything is cut evenly, what I like doing is cross-sectioning. So mind you, once we take in sections from front to back, next is we have to kind of cross it. Instead of going completely parallel, my personal preference, I like going on a diagonal. So from the top, I'll go on a diagonal. And to make sure that everything is cut all evenly, you can actually see like little wavelengths happen if things weren't cut all the way through. And in order to make sure that things are cut straight, repeat that same process from phase one and just step off on a diagonal, go through each entire section and find where that line becomes more straight. You can see all those little curvatures that happen. What you're really looking for is like a little squiggle swaggle motion in the hair, and your goal basically is to make sure you cut right through it to make sure that it's as straight as possible. Completely optional. Today we'll show you scissor comb. So we'll take one section, we isolate it, do scissor to palm. You could get those little long strands that shouldn't be there. Comb it down. You can see how it tightened up so immensely. And do the same thing on this side as well. All right, so the final stages of actually making sure that this haircut ties together into one cohesive piece. I like using a blow dryer, concentrated nozzle, and a round brush, preferably with boar bristles in the middle of it too. So this is what grabs the hair really nice and tight. So once the hair has been sprayed, one thing to keep in mind is the sections that retain the most moisture is actually the crown. So by making sure that the crown is dry first and migrating forward, you'll have an easier time actually blow drying your client's head. So from the top, low air setting, low heat setting. I like targeting the crown first, making sure that it's all nice and dry and velvety soft. And by using my hand as a tool to feel for all those little water pockets, you'll be able to tell what sections need to be blow dried out the most. Next, we'll pop on our nozzle and we'll work on parting Gao's hair out to the desired side. He usually styles it, and from here we'll just blow dry everything into place and make sure that everything looks all nice and sound. So what you're gonna do basically is you're gonna grab your hair by pushing it forward and you're gonna roll it back in order for it to grab. And you'll get like a nice gradual transition every single time you blow dry the subject and migrate from the back to the front. The reason why we do this a lot of times is you have a less hard time making sure that every single section is blow dried. And once you finally get to the front, know what hair from the back is pushing hair to the front to make sure that the last section is fully dried. So if you were to do the exact opposite of making sure that the hair is dried first at the front, you're gonna have a lot of wet hair pushing itself forward, and you're gonna have a harder time making sure that all the hair is gonna gradually be dry by the end of your blow dry session. Last but not least, the final piece to tie this whole entire puzzle together. We'll show you a 360 of how everything looks right now, blow dried and cut. So get a razor. Okay, we got a razor here. We're gonna load it. Right now I'm using actually Astra blades, and by loading it onto your straight razor, I like using a comb and making sure that you actually move the hair out of the way. I'm gonna just ride it in here, and as your thumb, with assistance of that comb, pulling all those longer hairs out of the way of danger, you'll be able to get a nice consistent stretch all the way through and all the way back. So keep that in mind. Keep a comb on hand, make sure it has a fine tooth edge, and this is what's going to actually help you create separation and stretch, making sure those hairs stay out the way from creating this part line with the razor. Ride it all the way back the second time, comb all this down to make sure you got it all nice and straight and figured out. And that's how you do a one fade with 0 tapers on a comb over, accompanied with a side part razor etched out. Here you go, gal. Thank you so much for being a model for today, dude.
Thank you.
Appreciate you kindly. It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it, bro.
It's a pleasure, man.